Okay, so we need to support the subframe with something adjustable, like a jack. So I put the jack under the subframe, and the point that I chose was the main rail of the subframe, which gets connected right there. So it's like right behind the coilover. So there it is. And if you look underneath, it's a rail that is right in front of the sway bar. So there's the sway bar, and there's that rail. That rail right there that goes like this. So this is what we're going to be supporting, but only on the passenger side. So that's where I put the jack, right in front of the sway bar. And now we're going to be loosening up some bolts that tie subframe to the chassis. So it's those two. So it's not this one and this one. So this kind of ties it to the side of the car. This one ties it to the center of the car. And this is the bolt that ties it to the subframe. So we're going to loosen up this and this. But the manual only said loosen up 5 millimeters. And it's probably 17 mil. And it's a 19 millimeter. Okay, so here's this bracket, and I just loosened up the two bolts, like this one and this one that connects the subframe to the chassis. And you can see there's a little, probably like 5 millimeter give. And there it is too. I did the same thing on the other side. You probably can't see here, but yeah, so I did the same thing on the other side. Loosening them up and having like a 5 millimeters of thread showing. So the next thing, we got to remove 4 bolts in the front that mount the sub-assembly to the front of the chassis. And these bolts are right here. Those are the two. So 1 and 2. And there they are on the other side. So there's the 2 bolts, and they're 17 millimeter. And there they are over there. So I'm going to remove those bolts now. So removing the 2 nuts holding the subframe to the front of the chassis. Alright, so we loosened up in the rear the connection of a subframe to the chassis. Now in the front, and now in the middle part we're gonna loosen up a bolt on the driver's side and remove it on the passenger side, and then we're gonna lower the passenger side. So the last thing we gotta do before getting to that bolt to lower the subframe is we have to remove the bolt that holds the subframe in the middle, which is right there. It's right behind the coilover. And from the bottom, the way you have to get to it is through that hole. So you have to use a long extension. See if I can get it here. So what I have here is a breaker bar with an extension that's going to go through that hole and go on that nut, on that bolt rather, and it's a 19 millimeter. Right now we're on the driver's side, and on the driver's side all you have to do is just loosen it up, just relieve the tension. So probably just one revolution, just one 360 degree rotation, which I already did, so it's all set. And right after I did that, water started leaking out of there, so that's why I have paper towels on the floor kind of catching it. So now we got to do the same thing for the passenger side, but we're going to be removing it completely because that's the side that's going to be lowered. Okay, so we're on the passenger side, and we're going to be removing the middle bolt that connects the subframe to the chassis. So same thing, using the long extension, the breaker bar. And we remove that bolt. Alright, so I lowered the subframe and finally pulled out this bolt from over there. Here's that bolt that was holding the control arm. It actually took a lot more loosening up of the bolts than the TRD manual said. The way it says, it's like 5 millimeter on the bolts that were holding rear part of the subframe to the chassis, and the middle bolt, the one that the water was leaking from. I ended up loosening it up a lot more so I can give more leverage to bring down the frame. But everything was fine. It's not really collapsing. That's what a lot of people said. The frame will collapse, but it doesn't even go down that much at all. So now that I have the control arm free, I'm going to be pulling out the sway bar. So the jack is still supporting the frame, even though it's not really going down, but you still should support it. And now we can just kind of pull out the arm, pull it out, and as you can see, it just falls right down, the sway bar. So now we have leverage to take it out from the other side. And the sway bar is out. Wow, that was a lot of work. So I pulled out the bars. So here it is in the orientation, the way it's facing the front. So the left side is the driver's side, the right side is the passenger. So now what we have to do is install the bushings. So there are the bushings. And the bushing actually says whether it's a left or right. So that's a left, and that's a right one. And you need to align them because, as you can see, those knobs are a little bit off center. So if we're talking about the left side, which is this side, you can take a look on the OEM bar. It's kind of rotated up and see that it's off center to the right. So then we take the left one. So this is the left one, and it's gonna go like this on the bar. So I'm gonna slide it, and it's gonna go like this, and as a result it's gonna be in the same offset to the right position as the OEM one. But before we do that, we're gonna put some lubricant inside. So I just put some grease in there into the bushing, and I'm just gonna slip it onto the and just rotate it around to kind of lubricate the area. Do the same thing for the right one. So the bushings are on, so now I'm just going to feed it back in. Okay, so I fed the sway bar through, and then I brought around the control arm. So now we just gotta install that bolt back in. Holy crap, finally. Alright, so I put that bolt back in, and now we can just start tightening all this stuff and retightening all the sub-chassis part, subframe parts to the chassis. So after I fed through the sway bar and put back that bolt that connects the control arm in the front, I'm just going to start by reinstalling this bolt right here that mounts the subframe to the chassis in the middle, the one that we had to go through the hole in the bottom with an extension. So I'm just going to do that on both sides. Okay, so there's this bolt that I was just tightening. So that's the middle bolt that holds the subframe to the chassis, and we have middle, front, and back. The middle gets torqued down to 110 foot-pounds, and then the front ones and the back ones get torqued to 70 foot-pounds. So for now, I'm torquing this to 110. Alright, so that one is torqued. So now we're installing the bolts in the front after we torque down the middle ones. So the middle ones were 19s, the front ones are 17s. And these get torqued down to 70 foot-pounds. Okay, so we just torqued the middle bolt to 110 foot-pounds, the front bolts to 70 foot-pounds, and now in the rear there's this bracket holding the subframe to the chassis, so we got to torque that to 70 as well. And that's it for this part. So we just retightened the chassis that we had to loosen up so we can lower it to get to that bolt that held in place the control arm. It was being blocked by the oil pan of the engine. So now this is all in place. What I'm going to do, I'm going to retighten all the bolts that hold the control arm in place.